In a world where education is key, finding the right math program for your kids is crucial. And that's where CTC Math steps in. This isn't just another math program, it's a comprehensive math curriculum covering everything from K to 12. What sets it apart? The video tutorials. They're not just educational, they're engaging, breaking down complex topics into bite-sized, understandable pieces. It's like having a math expert in your home, available anytime. And it's not about memorizing facts. It's about truly understanding math concepts. The kind of understanding that sticks with them, not just until the next test, but for life. Plus, the flexibility is unbeatable. Whether you're homeschooling or supplementing after-school learning, CTC Math fits into your schedule, not the other way around. Why not take the leap? Visit ctcmath.com today and start your free trial. Discover how a comprehensive curriculum can challenge your child's perspective on math. It's time to give them the tools they need to succeed. That's ctcmath.com. I'm a publisher, and one day my daughter Christina asked me to write a novel with her. Well, that day was long ago, and that little girl is now an adult. But our novels live on. The Truth Seekers Mystery Series highlights a homeschool family, the Murphy teens, in an action-adventure novel that is sure to entertain as well as teach creation truths. To get your copy, visit our website at truthseekersmysteryseries.com.
This is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network. Welcome to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Your host, Felice Gerwitz, is an author, a publisher, and your radio show host. She will encourage, educate, and inspire you with answers to your most pressing questions, from homeschool, marriage, parenting, and much more. Felice loves to equip moms to live a Christian life because every moment counts. Be sure to visit her website at mediaangels.com. And here's your host, Felice Gerwitz.
Hey friends, and welcome. My name is Felice Gerwitz, and today we are going to talk about homeschool pitfalls as well as some help. This is episode 486, and you can find today's show notes at Vintage Homeschool Moms. Well, I believe homeschooling is the right choice. But how do you avoid homeschool pitfalls that will sabotage your success? Well, that is what I'm going to tackle in this podcast. And I want to remind you to share this podcast with a friend. You can do that very easily by sharing the links on our website, or you can just go, tell your friends about Vintage Homeschool Moms, as well as the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network, where you will find lots of shows that are all homeschool and family focused. Visit mediaangels.com, the website for books, bundles, as well as a self-paced set, How to Homeschool Blueprint. And you can find that information again on our website, or just go to mediaangels.com for the products. Did you know that I was hesitant about homeschooling? When I first heard a friend mention her hopes of homeschooling, I talked her out of it. I do feel bad, okay? But this friend was overwhelmed with her 4 kids, and she didn't even have a set bedtime, and she walked around sleep deprived. I mean, my poor friend, I was trying to help her manage her kids. We would go to the park, and I was the one, grabbing their hands before they ran into the parking lot. And she just had, an abundance of love for her children, but she thought that meant they could pretty much do what they wanted to do. And she would tell me that they'd fall asleep in front of the television, and then she and her husband would carry them to bed. And half the time they'd wake her up in the night and want to come into bed with them. And so she really was kind of exhausted, to say the least. And I said, well, if you're going to homeschool, it takes discipline and having a parent who's awake and attentive. That's important. And she just realized she couldn't do it. But when I began homeschooling some time later, this friend was understandably upset with me. And, I shared with her that my reason for homeschooling was just going to try it out. My son was a struggling learner, and I was spending so much time with him. I felt like I was already homeschooling him while he was in school. So your decision to homeschool should be your own. And you shouldn't allow yourself to be persuaded by someone else, even someone very well-meaning like myself, Like I said, I feel really bad now when I think back at it. But, it was where I was at that point in time. Well, I really feel that homeschooling is the best option for your child today. The state of the school system. I don't need to go through all the horrible things that are happening. And it really is, sad when I look at it, because my problem is not with, the issues of what people want to do with their lives. My problem is, if you're going to do that in your life, don't do it in the lives of my family or the lives of children. It was bad in the past, but it's so much worse today. And I guess the other point I want to make is, when you start calling parental rights into question, that's when you need to say, what the heck is going on in this world? And parents, if you want to have kids that grow up to be well-rounded, I am telling you, homeschooling is the place to be. When I began homeschooling my son while my daughter was still in preschool, this is my first two, I looked at it as a way to just get my son up to par with his reading and writing. And I had a short-term goal. I was going to try homeschooling. I was going to try it for 6 months. This was in 1986, 1987, and I never looked back. It became a lifestyle for us. I even have a podcast called Homeschooling Lifestyle, and I will see if I can remember to put that link on the website. But if not, you can go to the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network, and there's a great little handy search bar at the top, and you can search for that. But anyway, homeschooling became a lifestyle, and my kids are super strong, faithful kids. They're adults now. My youngest is turning, I believe, 23 this year. And it is just a pleasure to watch my kids interact together and with other people. And I'm really happy that I can say each one of them has become a success in their own endeavors, whether it's staying at home with my one daughter and being, a homeschool mom herself. Another one of my daughters is not married, and she is a coach for softball and a teacher at a Christian school. My son works in our construction business with my husband, as well as being an entrepreneur. My other son's a Lyft driver, and my youngest is in the Army. And so I think that, if you looked at my children, they're almost like this cross sample of different ideas and abilities within a set of 5 children, but they are all, they're kids who can think for themselves. They're not going to be swayed by the flavor of the day or the month. And they really have come into their own as homeschool graduates. I think one of the fallacies is making your homeschool ideal or perfect or identical to a public or private school. I think as I say things, there's always an exception to the rule. My sister-in-law homeschooled her 2 grandchildren for a year using the same books as the school system because they planned on reintegrating the kids into the system. So in this case, it was a good idea, and she not only was highly successful, but she was able to raise their test scores with the one-on-one attention she gave her girls, and so that is so important. There's, this is more about overcoming some of the things you hear about homeschooling, more so than the success stories behind homeschooling. it's not always fun and games. A good friend of mine used to say that homeschooling is not fun, yet she homeschooled her boys K through 12, and they not only learned several foreign languages, but were proficient in fencing. And how is that not fun? And both of her boys are in the military now. But in this podcast, I want to focus on pitfalls, but I'm going to do it in two parts. The first deals with hearsay about homeschooling, and the second is in regard to the actual act of homeschooling. And please, if you have any questions about homeschooling or want to connect with other homeschoolers, join our most active group. We have an Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network group on Facebook. I don't think that group is nearly as active as our smaller group, which is the Homeschool Podcast Network family. If you look for that on Facebook, you can find it. But if you have a question and you're not on social media, you can just leave it in the body of this post. So if you go to Homeschool Pitfalls, episode 486 on vintagehomeschoolmoms.com, you can also leave a comment there, and we'll be glad to answer your questions there. All right, so the first is combating lies. And I have a list of 10 of them. You don't need to write this down again. It's on the website. But I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. So the first is you do not have enough time. I'm going to tell you that we all know that we have time to do the things we want to do. We don't have, maybe you don't have good time management, but everyone has enough time. They just need to manage it better. Number 2, you don't have an education degree. Well, if you don't, congratulations, because you're a step up. I have an education degree and several certifications, and I swear that held me back until I got into the groove of homeschooling. Homeschooling, again, is not recreating the school at home. The third is you work full-time. Well, I was at conference one year speaking, and I had a mom who was a doctor and had her own practice, and she was going to be homeschooling. She worked 4 days a week, or 3 days a week. I'm trying to remember. I think she had Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday off, and worked, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So she worked 4 days, and she was home 3 days. And she was planning on turning one of the rooms in her office into a homeschool room. And she said she just scheduled her day so that she had time in between her patients to sit with her kids. And so if this busy doctor can homeschool her kids because she really wanted to, I think anybody can homeschool. I also worked full-time from home, but hosting podcasts, hosting expos at one point in time. I wrote full-time. I, published books, but I managed my time. And so if you homeschool your kids, you're going to find that you don't have to worry about the kids lining up, and you don't have to worry about, the perfect schedule for going out to play. You're going to be knocking out a lot of homeschooling in a much shorter amount of time. The fourth is homeschooling is too restrictive. And that, again, is not a truth, because it can be very restrictive in that, you, again, don't manage time well, but it also allows you to know what your children are learning and for them to understand what is required of them without it being this big guessing game. The kids aren't going to have to worry about, getting their work done if they do it when it's assigned. And so I don't think it's restrictive at all. The fifth is you have to recreate the school at home, using all the same books that are in the school system. And again, I've already addressed that. The sixth is your kids won't get into a good college. And again, that's a fallacy. Out of my 5, the 3 that wanted to go to college all got into, state universities, other, noted universities, some junior college, and they all had no problem with that or getting scholarships. So I don't think that's a truth. The 7th is you won't have time for yourself, and you won't have a break from your kids. All right. So let's look at that. The people that are all about, I need time for me. Your kids have a bedtime, or they should. The kids probably don't get up as early as you do, or they might. But you can set up pockets of time where if you need to do something, the kids can be otherwise occupied. And truthfully, I didn't want a break from my kids. I wanted to know where they were. We have a big yard, so my kids spent time playing outdoors. And, I could sit out front in a lawn chair and just watch them play. It depends on how, again, you schedule your time. You can do so many different things. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of podcasts on this network. And if you have any questions about homeschooling, all you have to do is search for it and you will find an answer. I remember podcasting with a fellow podcaster, Meredith Curtis, and she talked about how she needed some downtime. And so she would trade with a friend and they would watch each other's kids. And instead of going to the grocery store or doing some other errands, she went to the park, put on praise and worship music, and just praised God and prayed. And that was her downtime and her hour with what she wanted to do. It's amazing how different people need different things. I had my prayer time before my kids woke up. And if they did wake up, then they were able to manage their breakfast at a certain point in time. And I would say, anywhere from 4 and up with something manageable that you can have ready for them. And my kids would peek into my room. They would see me with my Bible and my journal, and they knew that if they interrupted me or, couldn't handle their own breakfast, that the day wasn't going to go as good as if they let mom have their prayer time. And the reason they knew that is because if they interrupted me, I would probably be really grumpy. And I remember them telling their friends or their dad, about how mom needed her prayer time. So we can work around things. You just need to set some parameters with your family, and it's good for everyone. The 8th is people who homeschool are strange. I'm going to just say right here that everyone in this world that's not your direct family is pretty much strange. Everyone looks at everyone else and has their own set of ideals of what homeschooling is or what homeschool people look like or that sort of thing. And, when my daughter went to college, she met homeschool kids, all over the place. She even met a young man who used my curriculum, which I thought was so funny. And then she, is a coach at this private school, and one of the other coaches was homeschooled. So, homeschool kids are just fine and they're going to acclimate, and you don't want everyone, as my husband says, God made us all different, and that's a blessing. Number 9, your home is too small and there's no room. You can homeschool in an RV. We had a podcast at one point that was 2 moms that were traveling in RVs that homeschooled. So, there is as much space as you want there to be. Okay. You can keep your things in a bin and put your books under your bed. There's a way to do it. Okay. It just takes some creative abilities and the willingness to do it. And the 10th is you don't have money to homeschool. In the past, I would say this might have been more of a problem than it is today. There are so many things out there. There are so many freebies. There is just a lot of information. Like we've had sponsors in the past that like math curriculums that you just pay a set fee and you can access it with your whole family. So I don't really see that as an issue as it was maybe in the past when books weren't as accessible. So I would say that, you can buy secondhand books. And I see my books on Amazon all the time that are used. So there's not really a reason to say that money is an issue with homeschooling. And then let's move on to the homeschool pitfalls that are more of a challenge with the actual homeschooling. The first is a lack of vision or a goal. I think that with anything like in business, people have their vision board or their goals of what they want to do or their business plan. And I think that's an issue with many people, that they don't have a goal or a vision of what they want their homeschool to look like. For me, it was, really fuzzy at the beginning, but then as I continued homeschooling, I wanted my kids to have a good basis in their faith. And then I also wanted them to be able to go on and, have college as an option. But when they were younger, I wanted them to understand the workings of things. So they did a lot of hands-on activities. So we did have specific goals based upon their ages. And I think, just having a family vision and goal is important to keep everyone together. In the next few podcasts, I'm going to be talking a lot about relationships and family dynamics. Not that everyone in my family gets along all the time, but I have seen so many, things that, can work well with a little effort. And so, I want to share some of those, like the, family bonding types of things, working with your spouse and actually being on the same team, and then also a relationship with your kids. So that's what's coming up. But I think that's important. The second is a lack of organization. And I'm going to share that I was a mess when I started homeschooling. And I only had the one at first, and then I brought Christina into the fold. And then I homeschooled just the 2 children for a while until I had the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. But when I realized that my lack of organization was really stifling our homeschooling, I got cracking, and we did things that worked for us. The third is unruly children. If you, want, you can look at that topic on this podcast network, and you're going to find lots of things that will help you with that. But I also did a podcast for the kids, and I called it Just for Kids episodes, and you may want to look at those because I'm talking to the kids directly. And a lot of times I feel that kids want to be heard. They want to be understood. They want to know that you're listening. If we're divided and we're on our devices while we're talking to our kids, and then they do the same thing to us, we're not going to be very, happy about that. So that's an important thing, to have self-respect for each other. And then also setting parameters for your kids. That is really important. And kids are going to push the limit, as we all know. But that's where we come in as parents. And, I'm going to tell you something you already know. If you don't follow through when you ask your children to do something and go behind and check, they're just not going to do it, until they get into that mindset where they need to do what they're supposed to do. The fourth is not having a routine. Even though I wasn't the most organized, that was one thing that we did, is we did have a routine of what we did when we got up, small little chores that the kids did, what subjects we did, and so forth, so that when they got up each day, they had an idea of what was going on. Some kids love order, and some kids, just are willing to, let's drop everything and go to the park. I had kids that just pitched a fit if I would do that. So with those children, I would say, we might be doing something tomorrow, just to give them a heads up. And for the others to say, do not ask me 1,000 times if we're going to go, because I'm not sure yet. But just so I could give them a heads up of what was coming, and that was very helpful. The fifth is failure to check their schoolwork. Do you really think that anyone's going to do their math or, their reading assignment or anything else if you're not going to check? Absolutely not. So one of the things I did was I had checklists that the kids worked through, and they had to show me those as well as their work. And sometimes I allowed them to check their own work, but if I did, they were sitting next to me, so that we could go through and, double check anything that they may not have gotten right. And again, I have a lot of those forms in the How to Homeschool Blueprint that you can check out on the Media Angels website. The sixth is uncompleted assignments. I cannot tell you how many times they did not finish something. that they started. And so, my husband would say, well, do you want dinner? Then you have to finish your assignments. And so for a season, they had to show Dad their completed assignments before dinner when he got home. And that took the pressure off of me. So if you can enlist, Dad to help or some other person, that would be, really helpful in your life. The 7th is, your kids are going to be unsocialized. That is another fallacy because there's been a lot of studies now that have been done on homeschooling kids, and I won't go into them. I know I've done podcasts about this in the past. But basically, if a child is homeschooled and they are around other adults and other children their age within the home, they are emulating or copying the behavior of the adults as an example, rather than a whole room full of immature 8-year-olds. So you will find that homeschooled kids are the ones that go up and say, hi, my name is, and rather than just walking up to someone and bumping into them as a way to say hi. So like I said, there's been a lot of studies done on that topic, and it's a fallacy. It probably should have been up on the top section of it, but I just wanted to let you know that is not a truth. The 8th is unable to play sports, and my kids all participated. The first 2 were not, super interested in sports. My husband was super, interested in sports. He played in college. And so they just did more of an intramural and then some homeschool sports that were organized, whereas the younger 3 all played on the high school level locally. There were Christian schools that would work with homeschoolers. Actually, in Florida, there is a law that's been passed where high school teams need to at least give homeschoolers an opportunity to try out. I would say some of the private schools are better geared for that, more so than the public. And my kids, 2 of them went to college on sports scholarships. So again, something that is not true. That homeschool kids can play sports and compete on a higher level. The 9th is a lack of knowledge for the parent, like a mom saying, I can't do algebra or higher level geometry or trig or chemistry. Well, don't worry. There are a lot of online courses now, and there are people who are homeschool parents who have created courses that are just wonderful. Like Lisa Nearing has an entire, school online, and you may want to check that out. I'll put links to that in the information section. And she also has a podcast on this network. So, parents don't have to have all the knowledge any longer. And the 10th is you're unable to teach, or I'm not good at teaching, and so forth. Again, there are a lot of options, and you will be surprised at how good you are, especially if there's always been something you wanted to learn. Like for me, I was terrible in geography and as well as history. So I was excited to be able to learn alongside my children. Homeschooling is what you make it. If your children are unruly, the focus needs to be getting the kids under control. Teaching cause and effect is amazing and successful as well. But all I want to say is, our focus needs to be on our family, our children, and academics will come. If you don't get it one year, don't worry, that you can get it the next year. You've got summertime to work on things, but we're here to help you as a podcast network. And that was one of the reasons I created this podcast network, is for a huge, vast resource for homeschool parents. Again, join our Facebook group at Homeschool Podcast Network Family. Or again, if you have concerns, just go ahead and list them in this post on the website. Just go to Vintage Homeschool Moms, look for Homeschool Pitfalls, and I will be happy to answer your questions. Take care, God bless, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Visit Felice at MediaAngels.com and TheVintageHomeschoolMoms.com. Vintage Homeschool Moms is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.